Hello and welcome to another installment of the Wyfutbol podcast with me, Echizadoku, and Michael Dryden. This week, amid the sleep fest that is the international break, we take a look at some of the worst Premier League sides in history and discuss whether disastrous flops are becoming more and more common. Before we start, please follow us on Twitter at Wyfutbol_ and subscribe with us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, and YouTube. Dryden, how you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Is it Sleep Fest or Snooze Fest? Is that Snooze Fest,
That's
isn't
why.
it?
That's why I was laughing. I was like, that's definitely wrong. First of all, sleep fest. Oh man, what a sleep fest, dude.
uh,
That
yeah,
was a great tweet, though.
yeah, I'm not too bad. The international break, as you described, is definitely a snooze fest. So, um, so we'll get on to why we're doing this episode, but it is to avoid talking about the international teams because, um, there's a lot of games this week this weekend where like France played Kazakhstan, Belgium played Estonia, we played Albania, who I thought would be better than what they were, and then we've got San Marino on Tuesday, or tomorrow. So yeah, there's not loads to talk about there. But aside from that, not bad. Still in the northeast, but coming back to London on Tuesday. So yeah, not much to report. Looking forward to league football come back on. Sunderland are playing Arsenal in the quarterfinals of the Carabao Cup, which I mentioned last time, and that is getting ever closer. 21st of December, which is still far off, but getting those arrangements in, hoping to get tickets soon. So yeah, eagerly awaiting that. But yeah, how you doing, Cheers?
Yeah, I'm good. I've been spreading the word of why football to anyone
Across
that's
the
willing
land.
to. Yeah, anyone that's willing to listen. Churches, newsagents, gyms,
News
sports shops,
agents.
newsagents, betting shops. Schools, the whole shebang. And my current company that I do, because believe it or not, to anyone listening, I don't actually podcast full time. I have another
Mm.
career, which is hard to believe. Some people call me the new Jeff Stelling, so it's one of those ones that, aside from the
Nice.
podcast, I actually do have a day-to-day job, and I've been telling people about the podcast there. Been getting some real good feedback. Hopefully, I have some new listeners. Or they're all liars, and they're telling me that they're listening to, and they're actually not. So, if they
Mm.
are listening to this, know that I'm always watching and I'm always listening. So I know what you guys are up to. It's kind of like a empty threat, that one. But
You will
apart
be
from
you will
that,
be tested. You will be
yeah, you'll be
tested.
tested. But apart from that, no, I'm well. Obviously, Emma Smith Rowe made his England debut. I can't even remember if I brought up on this pod, but I told you, I think personally, that my friends in the summer, I tried to put a bet on that he'd make his England debut by May. No
Mm.
one was willing to take the bet on, but they all just laughed at me. So they were like, "Oh, you're an idiot," but we won't do the bet. Obviously, since he got called up and made his debut, I've been walking like a proud man,
Mm.
dropping pictures in the
Yep.
group chat and stuff. I saw Conor Gallagher actually got called up today, which is also
Yep.
quite due. Played very well so far this season.
Mhm.
You're right about the international ball. Very, very boring. I think Nigeria beat Liberia with 2 penalties, which is like, why would you care? Obviously, yeah, the France result as well was pretty mad, but not that interesting. So, I think turning towards some of the worst sides in Premier League history, I'm quite excited. I'm quite excited for this one because it's one of my favourite teams has been brought up, which should be good to talk about. So, why are we looking into this episode, Ryan?
Yeah, firstly, as we've mentioned a couple of times, international football is drab, so we're going to avoid that. Another reason is because we haven't really done like a flashback episode, flashback into the past for a while. I think a good Muller back in August was the last time we did something like that, and that's
Hmm.
a while ago. So just going to mix it up in that regard. This was a suggestion by you actually to look at the worst of Premier League teams. Probably aware that I've got a lot of expertise in this field as a Sunderland fan. Um, but aside from that, Norwich and Newcastle are currently sitting, both 20th and 19th, on 5 points after 11 games, which I'm going to come on to mention this later on. Sunderland, when I pulled the notes together, I'm obviously fully aware of the 15-point season that we had. We were on 5 points after 11 games as well, which is interesting. Obviously, it depends on the fixtures. It's very subjective, but it's just interesting that they're on such a low tally. Newcastle haven't won a game yet, which I actually didn't even realise until we did this. I think amid the hysteria with all like the takeover and stuff, I hadn't kind of fully appreciated that. Norwich are rooted 20th and could be facing a second relegation in only a few seasons. They seem to be the whipping boys, the continuous whipping boys of the Premier League. So we'll take a look at the 7 worst sides. I was going to do the top 10, but that would mean mentioning Sunderland on 3 separate occasions, which I'm refusing to do.
Hmm.
So we will look at the top 7, but we'll do a deep dive on the worst 3.
Yeah, I think as well, like extending it to the top 10 teams is just it's overkill. There are a lot of men and women in this country that day and night they go to bed and they have concerns and worries and issues. And one of them is definitely when your side is dropping like 11 points in the Premier League season. Like you'll be branded with that forever. All of the times you pop up in a group chat, you laugh at someone's haircut, you
Mm.
mention something about someone else, you're getting ripped. I know. When you're dropping 11 points, when you're dropping like teen total of points, you just have to be quiet. You're humbled. You're forever humbled. It doesn't really matter whatever happens or whatever you do. Like that's just a big L. Your best hope is that someone drops like a 9-pointer for the season, and then they can be the new laughing stock. But yeah, some of the sides in here, I do think we spared their blushes by just focusing on a few because yeah, no one needs reminding. That's for sure. So that's definitely one of those. Norwich is an interesting one to kind of mention. They've just confirmed Dean Smith as their
Yep.
manager, which should be interesting because they've been getting sent to the chip shop and back. They did beat Brentford, to be fair, last time
Mm.
out 2-1, but I've watched Norwich a few times and they've been looking porous. It's how I describe Norwich. They've been looking real porous. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he can turn it around. But yeah, that waits to be seen.
Yeah, we talked about it on an episode not too long ago. Was it Jason Cundy on Talksport? We mentioned he was saying that it's not Norwich not giving themselves a good chance by not spending several millions when they come up. Actually, they have brought in quite a few players. I think Josh Sargent came in, Lise Mello came in from the French league. They also signed Rashika as well, and they've got Billy Gilmore on loan. So players have came in. It's just they haven't spent loads and loads of cash, which is a theme of what we're about to talk about. So looking at the top 7 worst Premier League teams in order. So I'll go from 7. I'll just do the year in which they were relegated and the points. So number 7 is Sheffield United, 2021 with 23 points. Norwich City in 2020 at number 6 with 21 points. Number 5 on the list, their first appearance in this list, is Sunderland in 2003 with 19 points. Number 4, Aston Villa, 2016 with 17 points. Huddersfield Town got a measly 16 points in 2019, in the 18-19 season. Sunderland again, who did have the record in 2006, managed to amass 15 points, and Derby County currently hold the record, being relegated in 2008 with 11 points.
Yeah, I mean that's a miserable list to have read out. I think going back to a point on Jason Cundy, I think the point about Norwich not investing is irrelevant because yeah, I think Jason Cundy's opinion is pretty irrelevant. So it's one of those where like my dad like quite likes listening to Talk Sport. I don't know what slot he has, but if you want to listen to garbage like minute per minute, I don't know what slot he does. I think he does like one of the evening slots.
Yeah, I think he does.
He's
Yeah.
he's he's on methane. That guy is just chatting absolute nonsense. So I'm not surprised at that about Norwich because honestly, if I asked his opinion on like anything football related, it's normally useless anyway. So that's Jason Cundy. Yeah, that list is quite mad. Some of the teams in there I remember quite well. I remember that Villa team. Well, obviously Huddersfield, which we're going to discuss later on. Sunderland, man, appearing twice on the
Mm.
list is quite bad. But you know what? You, you know what? These things happen.
They do. They do. I mean, Sunderland's appearances came quite long ago. So the last one was in 2006. So, it's not like 15 years ago. So the pain has somewhat healed. But it's one of those things that when you're getting beat that much, like you just know quite soon into the season that your season's pretty much over before it started. You've been
Mm,
excited for this all summer, and then basically it's over. So it's just a bit like, what's the point, man? Like you have basically having to wait until the end of the season to then finally get your club back because you can still
mm.
engage with it, obviously go to games, but like it's just not fun. It's just awful. But of that 7, 4 of them have come in the previous 5 seasons, which we'll talk about later on, but could suggest a growing trend. The 9th lowest tally, actually, looking at thinking about the top 10, is held by Graham Taylor's Watford, and I mentioned that because that was in 2000 when they were relegated with that points total. That was 24 points back in the day. We were quite young when it happened, but I remember referring to that type of relegation as like doing a Watford for a long time because actually there was quite when you look at that list, there has been held by teams for quite a long time. I mean, Derby have held that record for 13 years. That might be because it's so bad it might never get broken, because their goal difference is minus 69, which is pretty abysmal. If you think that there's 38 games in a season, they've almost had -2 goal difference on average across every game. It's just absolutely
That is mad.
bonkers. Yeah, that Watford team, Elton John spent 3.7 million in total, which at the time was still not probably a lot. I remember Heider Helgeson was brought in, but he actually went on to spend 6 years at Watford. I mentioned that as well because similarly to Sunderland, we'll come on to talk about, we spent like 5 million. It does reflect on how much clubs are spending, what the transfer activity is, and that often results in what the squad looks like when they go into the league, and that often is a big determiner of whether or not they're going to end up with one of these flop seasons or have a good year or just go down marginally. Ipswich Town, Derby County, Huddersfield Town, and Sheffield United actually all hold the record for the earliest relegations after 32 games, which I thought was interesting because that wasn't that Derby weren't just there on their own, effectively, or that Sunderland's name was not on that list, which is always great. And then finally, on that overall list, just an honourable mention to Tony Pulis' Stoke City. They're not on the list of the top 7, top 10. Not sure if Stoke are even on any top 20 list, but he played some pretty poor ball. So I thought when we're looking at the worst teams in Premier League history, we're focusing on points. However, if we were focusing on other things, you could argue that it could be Mr. Tony Pulis and his very adventurous Stoke City team.
Why does Liam Delap, Roy Delap's son, have so much tech? Because it's when Rory Delap just epitomizes that time under Stoke when he's just launching the ball into the
Oh, I
box.
didn't realise that was his son. Is that the Man City forward?
Yeah. Liam Delap is Roy Delap's son. Now I'm googling that because I'm 99% certain that that's his
Yeah, it's
dad's.
not a very common surname, so
Uh, no, I said that with such confidence, Yeah. Rory Delap's son is Liam Delap, the City striker.
good. The integrity of this podcast has been
Yeah,
maintained.
it was that would have got edited out so quickly. But yeah, how can Liam Delap have so much tech? But yeah, Rory Delap was. I used to hate it when you see him drying the ball and he takes his steps back and
Yeah.
he launches it. Yeah, they were cold, wet, and windy on a night on Stoke on a Tuesday, wherever it was just it was a mad time. It's interesting. A lot of these teams and the aim, I think survival in the Premier League is very difficult. I mean, we were talking about how brilliant Brentford were for 4 weeks, and they've now lost the next 3 or so, and they're
Mm.
creeping towards the bottom. And it is really hard, I think, to stay there, even if some of these point tallies come in. Just to stay there for 2 or 3 years is really really difficult. I think Villa are the only side I'm looking at here that have been in the no, because they just got promoted not that long ago. All of these sides really haven't been able to stay in the Prem before Sunderland got relegated for consistent periods of time. I think Sunderland had
Mm.
a decade spell, or longer than that, actually. But then after that, it's quite difficult, which just shows you how hard it is not only to get enough points to stay up, but to consistently stay up. You're not seeing Arsenal at the bottom and Man United. You're seeing normally the same usual suspects, and sooner rather than later, it catches up with you, and then you end up pulling in 17 points. What are Villa doing? It's actually so bad. Yeah, it's one of those.
Yeah, 100%. And go back to Jason Cundy. Like these clubs come up. It's usually a promoted team. That's always a theme. Is because if they've been in the league for a long time, there's a reason. That means they've been surviving the drop for a long time. That their squad should seemingly have been good enough in that time, and so you'd think they wouldn't flop too much. I mean, Sheffield United did really well for a season, went back down, but were fairly new to the league.
Mm.
But if you do spend loads of money, you give yourself a chance. I mean, Villa did that, but the problem is when it goes wrong, the harder you fall. I.e., Sunderland, who were in the league for 10 years, but we didn't spend money, and then we ended up on the lowest point total end up with the
Yeah,
lowest points total in history for a while. Then we did spend money under a new ownership. We stayed in the league for a while, but now we're in League One. So it's just such a gambling act because that's why I don't agree with Jason Cundy, because you can end up like Sunderland so easily, or you can end up out of business. So end up with like Derby County, you're currently still on 5 points. So it's mad. But we'll move on to Huddersfield Town now. So we're going to do basically the 3, 2, and 1 of the worst Premier League teams. We'll start with Huddersfield Town, which wasn't too long ago. They were relegated in 2019 with 16 points, goal difference of -54. They were promoted to the Premier League in 2017 under David Wagner. So this wasn't them going up and coming straight back down, like it was with Sunderland and Derby. Wagner had previously been at Borussia Dortmund too, and was heralded as being a progressive manager who favoured kind of the Gegenpressing style of tactical play. They beat Jaap Stam's Reading 4-3 on penalties after a 0-0 draw at Wembley in the playoff final. Having finished fifth is one thing, but with a negative goal difference and still getting promoted, I find that mad. It has to be one of the first time that's ever happened.
But it is the first time. I remember
Oh,
when
is
it
it?
happened at the time. Yeah, it's the first time. Again, the integrity pod is, the integrity of the pod is literally based off that one fact. But I'm 99.9% certain that that is the case. If any Huddersfield fans want to confirm that, then you're more than welcome.
Yeah, that'd be great because that would give us a huge boost in terms of integrity, because it's been lacking in previous pods. So yeah, Huddersfield Town stayed up against the odds in that first season back. So in the 2018, they managed to stay up. They had the likes of Steve Mooney, Colin Quainer, Raheem Van La Parra leading the attack. They had Alex Pritchard in that team, which was interesting for me to see because he now plays for Sunderland. Spent a long time out with injury. Tom Ince was also in the Huddersfield side at that time. He is still at Stoke. He's been there for quite a while, but was once seen as a major prospect coming through, as was Alex Pritchard as well. Came through with Harry Kane and co in that Spurs team under Pochettino. Aside from those players, you're scanning through their squad at that time. I won't go through the whole full 25 man squad, but there aren't too many that are still playing in the Premier League, and that would be a theme with Sunderland and Derby as well. You're not going to you're not going to be in a team that finishes on 11 points and then end up playing in Champions League next season, are you? So Aaron Moy is at Brighton. He's a very good player, as we all know. He was on loan at Huddersfield initially, and then signed permanently. And Zanka, who's Jorgensen. I don't know why he's called Zanka, but he's at Brentford currently. So he's currently in the Premier League. Aside from that, I didn't recognise any players in their squad that are still in the top flight, which suggests it wasn't potentially fit for purpose, although they could have went abroad. So yeah, the following season, Wagner and co tried to add a bit of firepower. They were the league's lowest scorers. They clearly hadn't scored too many in the championship either, hence the -2 goal difference. So they tried to add a bit of striking intent there. They signed Isaac Mbenza, who is now at Qatar Sports Club. So you can see how far he's
Okay.
fallen. Adama Diakhaby, who is now at Amiens, and Ramadan Sobi, who is now at Pyramids Football Club. Interesting name in Egypt. So clearly they all failed to expectations. Have seemingly fallen off since being there. What I would say is they brought in quite a lot of loans across those years, which perhaps didn't help when it came to try and solidify a team in the Premier League. Perhaps they just didn't have the cash for it. Even though I think Aaron Moy was like 10, 15 million. In the promotion campaign, I remember seeing Izzy Brown was there, did really well. Casey Palmer was also there, and Casey Palmer stayed on loan for the survival campaign. Moy was initially on loan. I wonder if that caught up with them. Perhaps you do get a lot of promoted teams that have loan players in there. Ben White was on loan at Leeds, as was Jack Harrison. But they clearly had the cash to make. I think they've made Harrison permanent now and brought the reinforcements in, whereas Huddersfield seemingly didn't have that, and it caught up with them quite quickly. Wagner departed in January 2019 and was eventually replaced by Jan Siewert, whose time in charge never really took off. Huddersfield finished the season on 16 points, with Karlan Grant as the top goal scorer with 4 goals, despite only signing in January. They ended up on 3 wins, 7 draws, and 28 defeats. Overall, to be honest, I just kind of hadn't really thought this with Huddersfield as being in that list, really. Just maybe it was quite a forgettable season from them, which clearly it was from their own point of view. But yeah, interesting to see them there.
Yeah, they were a pretty boring side. They didn't really offer a great deal. The integrity of the pod has gone, unfortunately,
Oh,
Brighton, because Aaron Moy no longer plays at Brighton. He plays at Shanghai Port.
yeah.
Yeah, because basically I think it's that he's an Australian citizen. So I think the Chinese league, because of like it being in Oceania, he can move. You know how they have tax on foreign players of like 100% now. I think because he's in Oceania, he can play normally. So he's
Mm,
essentially treated as a local player, if that makes
yeah.
sense. Well, not local, but regional player, I suppose. So yeah, he moved there like last year.
Aha.
I remember Aaron Moore. I quite liked him. I thought he was decent. One of those players that looked like he would fit in at a club like Brighton. Wouldn't particularly play at a much higher level, but yeah, he was all right. I mean, there's just not much to add. I liked Wagner. I thought he was a nice enough character, but found Huddersfield quite drab, quite boring. I'm always rooting for the new clubs that do come up. Obviously, Huddersfield never been in the Premier League before.
Mm.
My only interaction actually with Huddersfield fans when I went to watch West Ham Huddersfield years ago, and these two West Ham fans told me that the Huddersfield fans, sorry, told me about how expensive their day was going to be and how excited they were because it was Monday Night Football, and they ended up getting in a fight with West Ham fans outside the ground and weren't allowed in. So
Mm.
that was that was mad. They told me, "Oh, we got the train at 2, like we're buzzing," and I was just thinking, all that money gone to waste. And that's all I have to add on Huddersfield. Looking at that team, yeah, Tom Ince, Alex Pritchard, it's just quite unforgettable. And I think, yeah, there's just it's one of those ones where these teams sometimes come up for 1 or 2 seasons and they literally never come back, or they don't come back for a very long
Mm.
periods of time. I feel like that could definitely be a club like Huddersfield.
Yeah, they've struggled quite a lot in the Championship, haven't they?
Yeah, they have.
Had the Cowley brothers in and haven't done too well. But yeah, we'll move on to number 2, the second lowest points tally in Premier League history, which is Sunderland. 15 points overall that season, which was a record at the time. Goal difference of -43, which is better than the others on the list, to be honest. So weren't conceding too many goals, just weren't winning any games, which isn't great. So I mean, Huddersfield were bad, but they never actually held the lowest points records. Wagner's he's at Young Boys now. His reputation's somewhat intact. Seems like it's possibly a case of poor squad and or just a poor squad that perhaps came up too early, finished 5th in the Championship. They overachieved perhaps, and then obviously recruitment on the back of that is largely the reason why. When you're a promoted team and you get recruitment wrong, you are going to get relegated. There's just no two ways about it. There's literally no two ways about it. So Sunderland, albeit only for 2 seasons, they held the record with the lowest ever, 15. Which is a bit of a shame for me because it came after one of my favourite seasons as a fan. And as a Sunderland fan, you're likely to recount the promotion wins. You know, we've won in my lifetime, I think, the Championship, I think 3 times. One of them was when I was very young. We actually won the league with 105 points, which is the second highest ever tally with Kevin Phillips and co. Niall Quinn, all the boys. Um, and so we won the league under Mick McCarthy the season before we went up. We brought in Dean Whitehead on free from Oxford. So Mick McCarthy brought in some basically some good valued signings. We've got Stephen Elliott in on a free from Man City, which shows how far they've come when they had Stephen Elliott within their ranks, and Danny Collins. All 3 of those players I mentioned, they spent a lot of their careers playing in the Premier League. So these are good value signings. We weren't splashing the cash, but we're bringing in shrewd players. And that side at that time, the one that went up and the one that was in the Premier League, included one of my favourite SAFC players of all time, which is Julio Walker, absolute legend. He then went to Middlesbrough after the flop, which is one of the symptoms or results of flopping that badly. Is that if you've got any players that you would like remotely liked, chances are they're going to go. It's going to be a big clear out. But the hope from that promotion was largely short-lived. At the time when we went up under Mick McCarthy and had that flop season, we were still owned by Sir Bob Murray, and the transfer key, as I mentioned before, was just 5 million. I think we spent roughly 5.5 million. That's according to transfermarket.com for any haters out there that want to question the integrity of this podcast, even though I almost just set it on I almost just set it on fire on the Aramoy comment. Biggest fee we brought in John Stead for 2.5 million from Blackburn. He was such a flop. Like he was so bad, man. I think he ended up playing for Notts County in League Two. I remember he was playing alongside. I think he was quite old at the time, but he ended up playing alongside Shola Ramiobi for Notts County at League Two. That's how much he ended up falling off. We signed Kelvin Davis for 1.7 million and Andy Gray for 1 million. They're the only really 3 notable signings. Daryl Murphy actually we signed for 100k, who ended up having quite a good career. He stayed for us for a while after, was instrumental in Roy Keane's promotion campaign, but the signings weren't that good. I mean, John Stead, he was doing well for Blackburn in the Championship at the time, I believe, or League One when they were down there. And so it's not like it wasn't a ridiculous signing. Someone who's done well at a previous club got him in there for 2.5 million. He was awful. He was absolutely shambolic. Justin Hoyt came in on a free. He scored against Newcastle that season. He used to play for Arsenal. Alan Stubbs came in on a free, and Rory Delap.
Alan Stubbs.
Rory Delap, who didn't. Rory Delap did not do many long throws for Sunderland, so I was completely unaware of that until he joined for Stoke. We also signed Anthony Letalic. He came in from Liverpool. I think we all thought that was going to be a kind of the jewel in the crown of the signings that summer. Didn't really work out. Marcus Stewart was our top scorer with 17 goals in the promotion win, and then he was just allowed to leave on a free. Went to Charlton. Always a little bit confused as to why that was. You'd think, yeah, fair enough, buy a new striker if you don't think he's good enough, but you think you'll just keep him around. He's clearly got a bit of
True.
technical ability. They all flopped, all those signings I mentioned, as did Sunderland. We first collected a point in game week 7 away to Wigan. Did win on game week 8 and then drew again in game week 9, so there was a little bit of hope there. So, as I mentioned earlier, we were actually on 5 points as of game week 11, just like Norwich and Newcastle United currently are in the Premier League. I attended my first ever time-away derby that season where we lost 4-1 to Newcastle. As I said, Hoyt scored for Sunderland. We actually took the lead with that goal. But Shearer scored a penalty and we lost 4-1. It was pretty. That was the point when the gulf between the two clubs was so bad and it was so hurtful. And that's one of the reasons I've taken this Newcastle takeover so badly, is that it's going to come back to those times, and I really just don't want it to happen. Just-
All roads lead back to the Newcastle takeover. You can be talking about the prawn sandwich you had at lunch, and you're still gonna be talking about Newcastle's takeover somehow.
100%.
It's one of those.
So we finished on 15 points, 3 wins, 6 draws, and 29 defeats.
I mean, that is damaging, to be fair. That's actually the year where Diaby broke his ankle at the Stadium of Light from a challenge from Dan Smith, which Wenger called one of the worst tackles he's ever seen. I think Dan Smith was given a yellow card. Yeah, I think we were winning maybe 1 or 2-0 in the 90th minute, maybe 93rd minute. Dan Smith decides to absolutely tear through Diaby, and he was never the same. He always cites that challenge as what destabilized his career. I think there was some sort of a balance issue which he could never quite get right, which led to him overcompensating.
Yeah.
Hence why he was always suffering from niggling injuries everywhere, and he got listed, unfortunately, as an injury-prone player, which is a shame because he was immensely talented. I wonder, with these wins, right, that these fans had, is what are the home attendances like, and also like how much is a win worth it to you? Like 3 wins, man. Like, and the thing is with those 3 wins, you got to be thinking to yourself, is it? Because you support your teams through thick and thin, however, but when you're shelling out, even back then, and I know that Sunderland tickets would be cheaper than London
Yeah.
ones, you're still paying money. You're still paying money. And when when you're seeing 3 wins and 29 defeats, it's like fucking hell. Like, what are you? Where's the encouragement? I think that's a lot of the time, right? I think there are teams that don't do very well, but there's like, where's the incentive? If you're getting banged up every week, you're a bit like, yeah, you know what? I don't know if this is going to be the one. Norwich, to a degree, have some entertaining games now. It's just that they're not winning. So I guess I could be like, oh well, the football's not actually that dire. But when it's not great ball and you're not winning, you must be sitting there thinking, yeah, you know, this isn't for me.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when I was actually doing this, I didn't put it in my notes, but I was actually surprised by how the attendance seems to stay quite high. I mean, Derby, I think looking at their last game of the season in their 11-point season, had something like plus 30,000 fans there, which I thought was pretty good. I mean, you're about to get the lowest points. At that point, you are definitely getting the lowest points total. Doesn't matter if it's 11, 12, or 14. You are going to get the lowest, and there's still 30,000 there. But as you said, on the attendance cost, still is a big cost. I mean, yeah, Sunderland tickets might even currently be 25 quid. If you're taking your partner and 2 kids there, and you're going for food before and whatever, it's a big outlay. So it's definitely something that to be considered. And yeah, how much is a win worth? That game, or that's what I meant before. Like the season's finished for you before it's finished. It's so soul destroying because you just all feel like you haven't even got a team to support. Because what are you cheering for? What is a win going to do? You're already going to go down. So it would be mad. And this is coming from a fan of a team that who managed to pull off countless great escapes in the Premier League. But that season we just knew. I mean, that was before the great escapes, but even so, like you just knew straight away. So yeah, moving on to the Rams, Derby County. So this is the 2008. They got relegated with 11 points, goal difference -69. Billy Davis, I've completely forgot about this guy until I did the notes of this podcast. Billy Davis was appointed manager in 2006, tasked with guiding Derby to the Premier League within 3 years. But arguably to Derby's long-term detriment, he didn't do it in 3 years. He did it in 1 year. They went straight up by the playoffs in that first season under Billy Davis. So in 2007, they got promoted. That was also the season when Sunderland came back under Roy Keane the season after 15 points.
Rory Keane.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, they beat West Brom 1-0 in the playoff final, finishing third in the league. Billy Davis was asked, interestingly, after the playoff final, he was praising the fans, praising the players, saying how great it was for the club. And then he was asked what he thought about becoming a Premier League manager, and he immediately just went quite. His face went pretty sheepish, and he just replied saying, let's just enjoy tonight," and just kind of darted off. He said that with quite a creaky, nervous voice. And then years later, in an interview with 442, he explained that actual scenario where he said, "Look, at the time, I knew how the new owners were coming in, and that his job was under threat, and probably just knew that the team was not in a good way, didn't have the cash to spend, and so like just knew he was in for like an uphill battle." Um, they were the victims of their own overachievement, really, to a large extent, and that can happen though when you've got playoffs involved. In theory, not having playoffs would have prevent this sort of thing to an extent. I mean, they came third, so if you did, if you did do first, second, third, they would still win up. But yeah, it's mad that a team can finish sixth and then go up. Really, it's into a league that is dominated by massive teams and massive clubs, even back then. So like Sunderland prior to their 15-point season flop, Derby's transfer activity before the season was minimal, and the caliber of the player they signed was pretty poor. Davies said he gave the board options for new signings, and the board opted to sign the cheaper ones in every case. Robert Earnshaw came in from Norwich, Claude Davis came in from Sheffield United, Kenny Miller from Celtic, and Benny Feilhaber came in from Hamburg. And the rest of the squad looked fairly similar to it was the previous season. It's quite a while ago. Some of these players were kind of forgettable, but looking at the side that was in the playoff final, you've got By-watering Net in goal that people will recognise. The rest of the side I just barely can recognise. Stephen Pearson, who scored the goal, recognise him. Pesky Salido, people will remember his name. But aside from that, there's just so many forgettable players that just never rose to much at all in the game in the top flight. And so it was disastrous. By the end of September, they had lost 4-0 at Spurs, 5-0 at Arsenal, and 6-0 at Liverpool, all by the end of September.
Oh, so they're competitive then. It's good to see.
And then lost.
It's good to see
and
that.
then lost 5-0 at home to West Ham. If you're losing 5-0 at home to any side outside the top six, you cannot be. Your job is not that tenable. They actually drew 2-2 with Portsmouth in the first game week. So points were on the board straight away, and they beat Newcastle in game week 6, but then failed to win another game all season. So
the one win came after the 6th game week.
Yeah, and that was it.
Oh my god!
They also crashed out of the cups
so
as well. They
depressing.
crashed out the cups as well, so they didn't even win the cup. It's pretty bad. They were taken over by General Sports and Entertainment in January of that season, and around that time, Davies basically came out in the press and said, "Look, the squad's not good enough. Maybe trying to make a statement to the new owners." And that he hadn't spoke to the chairman in a few weeks of the new ownership. 24 hours later, he was sacked. Paul Jewell took over 2 days later. Jewell failed to turn things around. He tried to bring in some of the old Premier League guard. Lauren Robert came in, Danny Mills, Robbie Savage, and Rory Carroll, all the old guys, in late March 2008. In late March 2008, an old sex tape from like 6 years ago, so from like 2002, of Jewell and his then mistress found its way to a British tabloid newspaper. That is come on, man.
Yeah, that's tough. Thing is, I liked Paul Jewell as well from his Bradford time and his time at Wigan as well. But yeah, you got to be doing better than that. That's abysmal. Also, got a special mention as well to Danny Mills and Robbie Savage, 2 of the worst. But so I mentioned Jason Cundy before. So Jason Cundy, we'll do in terms of Football League. So Jason Cundy is like bottom of League 2. So he's flirting with like semi-professional ball. Danny Mills. Danny Mills is like how many leagues are there? 15 leagues or something. 14
I don't
leagues.
know.
Danny Mills is like the 13th of 14 professional leagues. Like, he is bottom to. He's like local Pearly Panthers level of ball. Robbie Savage as well. When Danny Mills opens his mouth, like I just can't be asked to like listen to him. Absolutely abysmal. Robbie Savage as well. He's on final score on BT. Yeah, so yeah, I'm not surprised. Got no time for both of them. Rory Carroll as well. He is an L taker. when he was at Man United, yeah, the howlers he was dropping were quite mad. But I'm not surprised that they went down. But one win after game week 6.
Mm.
So after game week 6, you're probably thinking, yeah, it will be tough, but we'll try our best. That's as good as it got.
Mm.
Game week 6, that is very, very mad. Robert Earnshaw as well, special mention to him. Football League legends. I asked this earlier with the Sunderland wins. So how many were there? 3. How much is that one win
Mm.
worth? I had a manager, right? He used to be a Bournemouth fan. Or used to be. He is a Bournemouth fan. And because of where do they play? Dean Court. It's really small, or the Vitality Stadium,
Yeah.
wherever it's called. Because it's so small, it's very hard to get home tickets. So he only used to travel away to watch
Mm.
Bournemouth. And on average, it was costing him about roughly £650 per win. Because
What?
obviously at the time, Bournemouth had just come
Yeah.
up. And then the amount he was paying, I think he went to every away game that year. I mean, they won
Oh, so he
twice,
works
and he
out per
worked
win.
out.
Yeah, fair. God.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The cost was £650, and yeah. Was it worth it? I think he said no,
Mm.
and yeah, I'm sure many other fans would agree.
What I'd love to find out, and I did Google dual sex tapes. If anyone has managed to hack into my PC and look at my search history, that is why. 2002. Do you reckon that was a physical tape, or it was just because what I'm just picturing now is like someone. Have you seen Mike Bass's England Manager? Well,
Yeah, I
Phil
have.
Jupiter, the big guy who plays the really annoying journalist who just keeps shouting at Dave, like giving him loads of stick. I can just picture him, Phil Jupiter, with this tape under his arm, walking into the fucking mirror and just like waving this about in front of all the journalists. saying, "Look what I've got, guys." Um, so yeah, there's just how on earth, if it is a physical tape, how on earth is that managed to get its way to the press? If it's not a physical tape, which at that time it very much couldn't, it might not have been. It might have been a file on a PC. I don't know who. Someone's done him dirty there. Someone has done him very, very dirty.
When you got enemies, mate. When you got enemies, that's what happens. That's exactly what happens. And poor old Paul George been caught in the crossfire. But yeah, that's a miserable way to end the top 3 worst sides. It's been quite a miserable pod because all of these sides are absolutely rubbish.
Yeah, they're terrible.
So it's one of
Mm.
those. But yeah, kind of going to the final topic. Yeah, are these flops becoming more common? Do you think?
Uh, so the common theme looking at that top 7 is potentially yes, because as I said, 4 out of the 7 are in the last 5 years. If you extend to 10, that it does actually, I think it's still 4 out of 10, 4 or 5 out of 10. So again, that would then make
Hmm.
it of less of a trend. But I, I, it's quite difficult to say because some clubs like Sheffield United, they suffer from second season syndrome. The lack of quality kind of caught up. That kind of happened to Huddersfield a few years ago. It didn't happen to Derby and Sunderland. The theme there was more that they they were promoted. If all those sides finished, or Sunderland and Derby finished in the top 3, but just didn't have the cash to invest. The team wasn't really ready. I mean, at that time for Sunderland, I remember when Sunderland went up with Roy Keane actually, which was after that flop, but we won the league with like 94 points or something like that. Um, and that season, Graham Kavanagh was playing centre midfield alongside Dwight York. So it'd be the equivalent of like, I suppose, the equivalent of like, I don't know, Wayne Rooney or someone not as good in their career going to the championship and playing centre mid for a team. So it wouldn't be like bizarre. It wouldn't be like it wouldn't be so bizarre. But like, the point is that I think the quality of the championship has arguably got a lot better. And so in that sense, our club's more prepared when they go up. They've already got a level of quality that is allowing them to at least compete against some of these sides. Where before, like in Derby's case, they was just a complete mismatch. Like a complete mismatch. I mean, context needs to be applied in terms of how the clubs get there in the first place. When we're looking at what, like, is it becoming common or not? Both Huddersfield and Derby were promoted via the playoffs, so feasibly a team can finish like 6th, for example, and go up. So that is um, that is another factor in there. Derby overachieved and promoted, which can happen. Coventry City are currently in the playoffs now, and they've got a good side. I mean, they've under Mark Robbins, they've risen from League Two, and now they're in the playoff spots in the Championship. But if they go up, they have not got any resources. They've only really just got back to the Ricoh Arena. They're not going to be able to compete, and it can be detrimental. And Robins might end up leaving if they go up and end up getting smacked up. So it's just in the long term for them clubs, it's actually detrimental. I think it's more likely basically at a given point in time where the quality gap is a lot bigger, and in certain points in history that might have been more stark, that gap. Arguably, the quality of the championship is better now, but it's always going to be relative to the league above it. The bar seems a lot higher to basically win the championship, and so maybe they are more prepared. The counter is that teams at the top of the Premier League are continuously getting so much better than the rest. So you'd think that would create a growing trend of more flops because it's just less games for these teams to be able to win. Like if you're Norwich, the amount of the chance of you getting a scrape um, against like a Man United or Chelsea is just harder now. So that's less points that are available. So if you look at the points, if you're looking at the points that Norwich could feasibly win at the start of the season, of course they might scrape I know last time they're in the league they beat City quite convincingly. But if they look at the teams that they think, okay, we can conceivably beat, that's probably shrunk from them 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And so it just makes the challenge so much harder. And then some of those sides outside the top six are even better. So you could argue that it should create more of a trend. But actually looking at, the history of the top 10, I don't think it is a growing trend, perhaps. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's one of those where like you there's more money in the game when it comes from the top down. So the more money the big boys get, the harder it is to stay in the league, which also then means that there's teams like Yo-Yo, and then in the championship you have a group of teams that are better than the rest as well, and there's a divide there because they're constantly getting promoted and relegated. Like West Brom and Norwich are two prime examples that always seem to, and Watford
Mm.
always seem to go up, come back down, go up, come back down, but their squad's too good for the championship. But then in the Premier League it struggles. I think you are right that where do you pick up your points from? I think there is the template of a Brighton where you have to have a long term plan and a very good manager in Graham Potter to navigate those early years to then try and build your way up the league.
Mm.
Because then even when you do, like you kind of get caught in what Newcastle have been doing really, because they've lacked ambition, where you just you survive, but you're not really doing anything. You could even argue potentially that was a fault of Sunderland's. You get promoted, and you have aspirations to aim really really high in the league and stuff, but it doesn't really come to the fore, and you're just drifting.
Mm.
That 13th is the spot where like you're often quite far from relegation, but you're in no man's land.
Yeah.
You're not really near European places. You've got Premier League survival, which guarantees the money, but what is it that you're actually trying to do? Because it's very difficult. I'm kind of flipping a point, not about where you get your points from, but like what is it that you're doing in the league?
Yeah.
Because if your aim is just to sit there and survive, then I think you'll get relegated. You have to aspire to say, okay, Europa Conference ball is our ultimate aim, and that should be what we kind of work towards. I think we'll definitely see more flops over the years come through. I don't know if anyone's beating that 11. That 11 points is mad. I don't know about that. I think what we are seeing is these sides are coming up, and some of them are coming in with very low points, but the quality is improving. You compare those sides of 2007, 2008 to the teams getting very few points now, that the quality has risen a lot, but obviously they're still not delivering the goods. Norwich this year look like they want to give people a run for their money with the way they've been playing. We'll have to wait and see if Dean Smith can work his magic.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, also as a final point, like as these big clubs get really, really massive and they just have more and more players that can be loaned out domestically, that does have an effect on the quality of the lower, like basically the second half of the Premier League and the Championship in particular. So I do think the Championship's got better, because the money's trickled down in a sense. So to the Championship anyway, you have things like parachute payments, which kind of guarantee that. And so that league has become some of the you're given like 8-figure sums getting transacted in the Championship. Like it's crazy. Even as far back as like Ross McCormack when he went, I think, to Villa,
Hmm.
like such huge fees getting transacted, and so players are coming in from parts of the continent. Might be more difficult now with the Brexit point system, but now you're just seeing now, and I think it's because it's got better. Now you're seeing teams in the Premier League actually valuing the Championship a lot more for their loan players to go to. So Conor Gallagher was at Swansea before. Obviously, Mason Mount was at Derby. Tomori was at Derby as well, with him from Chelsea. We've seen a lot of loan players go there. And we've also seen loan players go at the bottom of the Premier League as well. I mean, obviously Conor Gallagher's now at Crystal Palace. You know, Billy Gilmore's at Norwich City. So is that meaning that there's more availability for these teams going up to get these side players that makes them a better outfit when they come up? But then, as we saw, I mean, Sheffield United did have one of those seasons where quite a while before they were looking bad. I mean, they got relegated after 32 games. So, that depends on how the other teams are doing as well. But 32 games, man. And they pretty much were down. We knew they were down for a while. It was like 25 games in, you're pretty much relegated. 13 games left. Bloody hell.
Oh, that's what you're playing for this week. I hope not to lose 4-0. It's one of those like yeah, it's we should have really done the episode on like speaking to fans from these times if they're still alive, because I think a lot of them would have perished after this season. Your dad's still here though, to be
Yep.
fair, and he's lived through 2 of them, so
Yeah.
so should have got Colin on. But yeah, no, it is yeah. Because it's the dream to get to the Premier League, and I get a lot of fans want that, and it is quite sad. We laugh about it now, but I can imagine being a fan of a Championship club. I wouldn't say Sunderland is a good example because Sunderland are a big team. I think if you're like a Huddersfield, whereby you know that this could be it,
Mm,
genuinely, I would say for a Huddersfield Town team, I don't believe they've been in the top flight for a very long time. You would think, we may not be back for a very long period of time.
mm,
That would mean to me, if I then went through a season which was terrible, first straight off the bat or after 2 years, that'd be very, quite sobering. Whereas Sunderland, Derby, to a degree, you can kind of ride that off. Villa, especially Villa, European champions formerly. So you would expect those teams to eventually come back. I know Leeds are in the wilderness for absolutely
mm,
years, but they did eventually make it back. But you get those sides: Huddersfield, Blackpool, Bradford. Uh, those sides that kind of come to the Prem, and when they go, they're not really going to come back, or not for a very long time at
mm.
least. And I guess that's the fear when you're watching your side get pumped 4-0 every weekend.
Very true.
Well, I think that's all from us this week. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. That's not what we normally say on the outro, but that's what I'm going to say this week. And we will see you soon. There's a big episode coming up, which will be revealed sometime shortly on all digital platforms.
Great
Thank you
stuff.
for doing the episode,
No
Dryden.
worries.
And yeah, we will see you all soon. Keep your eyes peeled.
Cheers, guys.
Keep your eyes peeled. Cheers.